Welcome to Zero Trust Journey, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring you real-world insights and practical advice on zero trust. Whether you're a cybersecurity leader, practitioner, or just starting your zero trust journey, this show is for you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victor Monga. I am the producer of Zero Trust Journey podcast. With me today, I have Steve Turner, who is ex-analyst at Forrester, currently at Microsoft. Steve and I have the same problem that we can't show when it comes to zero trust. So today we're gonna spend about 30 minutes with you to talk about zero trust, pitfalls. It's not a product yet. Yes, I say that every time. And some of the personal things that Steve had gone through when it comes to zero trust, interviewing for different roles, or talking about zero trust from the practitioner level. So not from the vendor side, but practitioner side. And my favorite topic, zero trust architecture. I always talk about it where there's a lot of zero trust conversation, strategy, guidance, documentation out there. But when it comes to zero trust architecture, how do I do this thing? There's not a whole lot. So we're going to talk about it. With that, Steve, welcome to the show. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much, Victor, for having me. Really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Of course. Let's do it. So I always start with this question from my guests that, are you a coffee lover or not?
I am a devout coffee lover with 2 children. It's a necessary thing in my life.
Okay. We can continue. All right. So help us understand, when you heard the word zero trust the first time, what was your knee-jerk reaction? Did you feel that this is yet another buzzword, or were you all bought into it?
Yeah, so my reaction initially when I heard the words zero trust was definitely the buzzword bingo, reaction. As most of my career being spent as a practitioner in the space and implementing a variety of different solutions, you kind of get trained to be gun shy around anything that comes out there from a terminology perspective, and really just sit down for a moment and dive in and research it before you buy into something. But maybe that's what they were going for when they came up with the term zero trust, right?
Yeah, I think John Kinderwag, when he coined the term, I think his idea was that, hey guys, this is too much flat networks. We need to start with microsegmentation. And as it was built upon that fundamental, now we have a framework that people are using and adopting it and actually seeing a reduced risk in their enterprises. So you as an analyst and have interviewed for roles who required some sort of zero trust and stuff, give us your journey about that. I mean, when you sat across the chair and interviewer asked you that, hey, we have zero trust, or what do you understand of zero trust? What was that look like?
Yeah, so that was an interesting journey in itself, right? Because as an analyst, you are vendor agnostic, you are solution agnostic, and you're really trying to operate from the perspective of what's going to move forward the industry and what is going to help folks secure their organizations. And so as an analyst, you hear a lot from a variety of different vendors, all trying to show you how their solution is helping, organizations achieve security in some way, shape, or form. I was focused on zero trust security architecture, network analysis and visibility, or NDR, as some people call it. And so those areas were very much in that respect of I'm serving customers who are trying to protect their organization. So my research was focused on delivering stuff that they could go and implement in their organizations practically, and not being caught up in the buzzword bingo or the marketing spiel that a lot of vendors, come up with, and, it's a very early days, and I'd still argue it's still early days for zero trust, hence why we're probably having this conversation, right? You know, a lot of vendors are trying to, instead of back into zero trust with how their solution enables the different domains underneath the zero trust architecture, the zero trust framework, a lot of vendors were trying to shove their solution to meet whatever zero trust means to them. And that, so you saw a lot of zero trust data players, zero trust identity players, folks saying that they could deliver zero trust if you just buy into their solution. And there's a couple of vendors that still stake their reputation, from that perspective. And a lot of organizations, especially, the federal government, coming in and wanting to latch onto this framework to accelerate, their security journeys and adequately protect themselves, especially, when we hear about, war moving from like this physical like space into the digital space where, we don't even have to fight, a land war in order to attack other nations or, get one up on our adversaries. So all in, it was a very interesting journey and it helped me level set my understanding of zero trust and help define some of the stuff in space so that, organizations understood what they were actually buying, so that they weren't in a position, to go and make multi-million dollar investments in something that really wasn't enabling them to achieve their zero trust goals. And, there was a number of pieces of research that I had the opportunity to publish or update. Forrester had the practical guide to zero trust. There was a ransomware toolkit that I put together while I was there that, supported a lot of those zero trust principles. But I think my favorite thing was getting to speak and advise a lot of organizations on how they could level up themselves in the different domains, that we talk about when we talk about zero trust and what that journey looks like, and give them practical guidance on how they could implement things rather than, what a lot of vendors like to do is kind of talk at that 10,000-foot view all day long, and then when it comes to actually implementing the stuff, they don't have, like, a clear answer. They say, "Just buy my product and install it, and you'll get there, trust me." So that w weeding through all of that was very interesting.
I think that trust me, bro mentality had left, especially with the CrowdStrike incident, that now even security vendors have to prove what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how it actually solves customer problems. Steve, you mentioned some pitfalls in there, but I want to double click on something where you said the way I see it, there are two camps. One, you and I, we are fully bought in advocating zero trust. There's the other side where they're saying, yet another buzzword. I'm not sure. You must have a trust in people, processes in order for an organization to be successful. And usually I get that. But at the same time, just because I have a door in my home doesn't mean I'm just letting tailgating with the people who my family, right? So my family gets in, but doesn't mean I'm letting other strangers just walk in. So that there is some sort of trust in my family, but yet we have identification, authentication when they're coming in. The point I'm trying to make is that for vendors, if it's not AI, then it's zero trust. If it's not zero trust, then it's AI. That's about it, right? Most of the security vendors are playing in those two words right now, like most of what they're putting out there. For customers, when they're seeing zero trust, where do they start? Where do they feel that, yes, there's a zero trust maturity model, you can look at it, you can evaluate it, but not everyone is actually sophisticated in their security program to actually even consider ZTML. So from you as a practitioner side, what can you recommend to our listeners that would be like, okay, if you have this or if you have that, then here's what you can start. And I always say, take a full credit of work you have done. Like if you have implemented SAML, if you've implemented MFA, if you've implemented microsegmentation, least privilege, whatever that is, take a full credit of that when you're building zero trust architecture. Don't discount it. Don't discard it. That is a work you have already done, and that can be used in the architecture. Steve, what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, so I love some of the points that you made when you were talking about, how you talk to a lot of organizations when they're going down this journey. So a couple of points that I want to make there that, when I was advising folks as an analyst, now even on the vendor side, how I talk to folks because, I want to be that trusted advisor still on the vendor side of things. And, a lot of organizations I've seen, that I've worked at and that I've advised that they try to throw out the baby with the bathwater where they're just like, you know what? Like, we got to start fresh. Zero trust means that we got to just stop doing all the projects, stop moving forward until we create this zero trust center of excellence, spin up a program team, spin up the project plans, all of those types of things. And that's totally the wrong move. Like, because, when we look at the other side of things, right, zero trust came about because the way that we were protecting our organizations didn't work. Like, perimeter based defenses, all of that it just didn't work. And what I advise a lot of organizations to do is like, if you've got projects in progress, and I love some of the stuff you called out was like, if you've implemented multi-factor authentication, you're already on the pathway towards zero trust. Now, maybe you have to adjust what your North Star looks like for some of what the end state of how you want those projects to end up be. But that doesn't mean you have to stop everything you're doing. I advise a lot of organizations to take an inventory of all the projects you have going on, because I'm sure that you have a litany of security, business, whatever other types of projects going on. And how can you weave in, what you'd like to level up in your organization to match the zero trust reality that you're trying to ultimately realize? And that's where I'd start. If identity is the big investment area that you're heavily pouring, dollars, security dollars into, pick that area, lean into that, match that to the public frameworks that NIST has published out there, the open group, CSA, like all of those organizations are publishing such valuable guidance that's all free that you can leverage to understand and benchmark where you're at on your zero trust journey that you may have not even realized you've started with all of these litany of different security projects or business projects you have going on. So I advise folks to lean into an area that they're already, maybe knee deep in or waist deep in, and use that as your jumping off point to maybe the next area or planning the next thing, or put those projects integrated together from a zero trust perspective. And maybe if you're implementing different network security solutions, those things can go hand in hand rather than separate, distinct projects. Because I found that organizations that pursue things in that method, there's just a lot of more disconnection, a lot more contention, because you have to get more buy-in in order to spin up all the right things. And I see many organizations start and stop, over the last few years for a number of different things because they wanted to
Yeah.
pursue that zero trust nirvana, like with all of the projects that they're spinning up. But then they're just creating more political backlash within the organization, more confusion, and a lot of other things that are just totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work from that perspective.
And we'll talk about towards the end of the show today how to convert that language and some of the verbiage into business conversation, which again, security have been saying is nothing new today. But when cybersecurity framework came out, like we had those free 5 pillars: identify, detect, protect, recover, respond, recover. Everyone told me that, hey, the way to look at it, where you don't invest your security program into 1 or 2, you consider all 5 of them. I see zero trust somewhere along those lines as well, where the work I'm doing, to your point, look at your projects and inventory them and see what you are doing and how you categorize into the buckets. Okay, if I have new project which actually help me reduce attack surface, because now we can actually segment these workloads into their own low island, that's part of zero trust already. If you have a project that you're actually going to go and test your security controls every quarter, every month, every day, doesn't matter, whatever the frequency you choose, that is part of continuous security verification. So identity, honestly, yes, that's the number one thing now, because everyone is decentralized, everybody's roaming, but we all have done something. This is not new. We all have been saying that we need to put MFA, we need to actually have SSO, SAML, whatever that is. We've been talking about it. What I was long rant about, the point here is that when you're doing the projects, you can actually claim that as part of, okay, this was my CSF journey. This is how I have divided it. I'm going to do the same for zero trust as well. And again, there's no one side, like now everything is zero trust and you ditch your CSF if that's what your program was allowing. It just means that there's a new way of looking at it. There's a new way of measuring it. That's just what it is at the end of the day. Now you're going to measure your security program against a framework that it's widely adopted, first of all. Second, it gives you a new approach that with all the problems we've been talking about, phishing, I think, what is it? This is 14th year.
Ugh.
I wrote LinkedIn post about phishing. 14th year. I'm not kidding. And when I was writing it, I was like, is it still worth it? I'm sure I wrote it. The point is that if the problems are still the same, we need something different. The traditional ways are not cutting it. And zero trust, if it gives you that, where maybe There won't be 15s. Maybe next year I won't have to write about phishing. There will be something else. And I'll be happy to actually write about something new. That's what it boils down to. Let's not trust what we've been doing. And it kind of questions the security program as well, that how do we hold ourselves accountable? And let's talk about now, Steve, this is your favorite topic. How do we hold vendors accountable who are coming into my office and saying that, buy my blinky box and you got zero trust?
Yeah, and trust me, I can see the little bit of irony that, I'm definitely on that side of things now, but I still encourage, like, all the customers that I serve. Yeah,
You're
like,
practitioner first. Steve, you're always going to be practitioner.
I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. And that's how I still look at myself. If I was in my customer's shoes, how would I pursue this, right? And how would I not want to have the wool pulled over my eyes, like, if I'm going and purchasing a solution? So what I advise a lot of organizations to do, even the ones that we're selling to, is, ask us to put our money, put the solution, where our mouth is. Like, if we're telling you that the solution can do this, you better damn well show me exactly how it can execute in that area. My favorite, test question, that I use whenever I'm evaluating a vendor or asking, a customer asking me to help them brainstorm a list of requirements, for a vendor, is asking them how they map to the different zero trust, the domains underneath the zero trust framework, and what capabilities are at the end of me implementing this solution, what capabilities will I have leveled up in my organization? And again, I know we keep harping on identity, but that's near and dear to my heart, and a lot of my background's been there. But, like, when we looked at, the NIST publications, and we look at, like, the authentication framework, around the different authenticators and the different levels of authentication. I love, whenever a customer asks me, what meets this AAL level, within your, suite of solutions that we're talking about today. And me being able to pull out the proof that this does exactly what it says it does. And so I found a lot of vendors kind of like pause for a significant amount of time when you ask them, tell me what capability this levels up, show, even pull up, whether it's the ZTX framework that Forrester came up with, or some of the mountain of different, visual representations that NIST, CISA, and everybody else has kind of published out there. Pull that up, right? During the vendor conversation, and say, how do you map to this? What is your solution going to do for you there? If they don't have an answer for you, I would totally say thank you, but no thank you, and not even pursue, the conversation with them. Because if they're trying to sell you that and it's in all of their marketing materials, they should be prepared with an answer to all of those questions. And it's totally within your right to just, back out of maybe long held partnerships that you have with a number of different vendors that you've had in your organization for years or tens of years. If they don't meet your future security goals that you're pursuing here. And so I recommend, you hold every vendor accountable, and so they could talk to you about the solution all day long, or the tool that, is going to solve world hunger for you, or, like you were talking about, phishing is still a solution that we haven't solved. It's okay. You're telling me that, and you're telling me that your thing is zero trusty, whatever that means. And, like, but what's the capability? What is this going to level up in my organization? What business problem is this going to solve along with all of that? And if they can't answer any of that, it's not worth your money or your time.
I love it. And Steve, you know my feelings and sentiments about when it comes to zero trust vendor products and vendors who come in and say, hey, I have a zero trust solution for you. You said it right. If they can map back to zero trust code tenants and say, hey, this is how I cross the ecosystem, and in the listen to them very carefully at any given point, if they say, hey, you just need my solution and that's it, the game is over. If they say, we become part of your architecture, we are the solution, we become part of the ecosystem, we actually integrate with other zero trust solutions as well, yes, that's where you stay, that's where you shake hands, that's where the real partners will tell you that we don't do it all. So does the other one. They don't do it all. But together, this is how we actually solve the problem. They are the four core tenants, and this is where we cross-cut in the ecosystem, and this is where we fit in your architecture, in your solution. And honestly, to see Steve's point, if they hadn't asked smart questions about your zero trust architecture, they don't understand. It's transaction. They're not invested in the deal here. They just want to say we have zero trust solution and here it is. They're really not interested because every zero trust architecture, so far I think I've seen 13 different architectures for different companies. None of them are same. They are based upon the core tenets of zero trust. They take the framework. The architecture is completely different. I've seen 13 of them. And every time I see something like, because this is part of my research, and I look at it, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that you can actually fit these pieces in this way, but ultimately the goal is that we're going to continue doing every verification transaction, every workload is in the microsegmentation. You only get access to what you need and just in time, and that's it. There's nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, continuous verification. That's exactly what the architectures are not exactly the same. You have guidance, you have framework, you have a little bit of understanding that there's cross-cutting technologies here, but it's not exactly the same. So a vendor can come in and say, oh yeah, we have solved zero trust problems. If you put my blinky box and here you go. No, ask them about product applicability guides. A lot of companies like Corefire, Tavora, they do those PAGs. It's called product applicability guide, where they actually look at the product and they go in and they measure against zero trust, they measure against HIPAA, they measure against like whatever the framework you want. Ask the vendor if they've done it. It's a third-party independent verification of their product, so that you kind of get an immediately response that if they trust their own product or not. If they haven't done it, maybe they themselves maybe don't trust their own product. Also ask them if they're using their own product. I have seen vendor, I'm not kidding. They would come in, bash the competitor. They open their laptop for demo. I'm not kidding. I've seen it. I can't name names, but they literally have the competitor product installed and they say, oh, yeah, our IT uses it. Why your IT is not using your own product? I don't get it. If you're in direct competition with that little thing that you have installed on your computer, why are you not using yours? You're telling me to ditch the competition and buy your product. So anyways, that went sideways. Okay. Next topic is training. How do customers, the practitioner side, get trained in zero trust? Yes, CSA has a great training. I will advocate it all the time. But is that it? Steve, any other trainings you have seen it? Maybe vendor side, you have seen some trainings that you can recommend?
Yeah, so that's, that's a tricky space, right? Like again, like you called out, CSA has a pretty good training that they spend a lot of time and investment on making sure that it's pretty concrete about how they're defining things and it's vendor neutral as much as possible, which is a huge bonus, but, back to kind of like what you were mentioning earlier, at the end of the day, yes, companies are going to have to implement a variety of different solutions and products, and they're going to have to know how to use those products and how they fit into their zero trust narrative. And so I've seen a variety of vendor specific trainings that have been really, really good. And I'm seeing a lot of vendors in the wider ecosystem start to lean into the vendor agnostic side of things. Um, Microsoft has a huge library of free training, around zero trust, and all of the different things that we've been talking about here, like around continuous verification, and assessments and all of that. And so I highly recommend that everybody, check out Microsoft Learn and, check out the trainings that are there. Google has come up with quite a few vendor agnostic trainings. Now, do they still ask product specific questions in some of those trainings? Absolutely. But again, you're seeing that the larger, vendor ecosystem out there is starting to make their trainings vendor agnostic because they know that they have to teach these basic tenets of security in order for organizations to, at the end of the day, they're trying to get them to buy their product. But if they don't understand kind of what's at stake, especially when we're talking about zero trust framework or zero trust architecture and what domains are underneath that and what it actually means to support all of that, then they're not really going to sell to their target audiences because, people are going to think that it's FUD, and think that they're really not, they're trying to pull one over on them. So Google has quite a few free trainings as well around zero trust, as well as all of the deep knowledge on the domains underneath zero trust, supporting networking, identity, workload security, endpoints, like all of that type of stuff. Both Microsoft and Google have spent significant time building out those trainings. I know the Open Group has also been, publishing a lot of research, like, while we've been talking about certifications and, all of that type of stuff, the Open Group's published quite a lot of research that's all freely available for practitioners out there, again, to learn,
Yeah.
what does zero trust mean? How does it map to what, my business is pursuing? All the crunchy language that kind of gets lost in translation when somebody's really focused on the technology and doesn't, come back up to this level to get the buy-in from a variety of different stakeholders. Um, and then, I don't know if maybe I'll be able to say the same thing next year, but Twitter, and I still am going to call it Twitter forever and ever. Twitter is a great resource for folks that are getting started out, maybe in their security career and wanting to learn about zero trust or kind of anything that supports, that zero trust narrative and the framework, the architecture, and kind of pursuing all of that. And you could check me out on Twitter. A lot of the people that I follow, are uh, folks that I'd recommend in leveling up your knowledge and, being able to get your own research. But I'd say that, again, because like we were talking earlier, anything existing that you're doing from a security perspective, as long as you're leveling up your knowledge of all of those different areas, the connective tissue of using a zero trust framework or a zero trust architecture should be a natural next step for you if you already know maybe 2 or 3 of those domains, or maybe you only know one of those domains. It's just kind of shifting the narrative for you from that perimeter-based security mindset that you've had in the past to the perimeter-less, and talking about, you've been talking about it a lot in our conversation today about building those micro perimeters. I love when John talks about this because he's like, it's not that complicated. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why everybody's overcomplicating this. It's all about building those micro perimeters. Now, what are you using to build those micro perimeters? Depends on what your organization is pursuing from a security perspective. And so leveling up your knowledge in all of those areas and using some of the things that I mentioned, can quickly get you to a stage where you can call BS when you're having some of these conversations, or you can educate internally to a lot of the folks maybe that aren't believers in the fact that zero trust, is buzzword bingo and that it's not a real thing. And so, highly, highly recommend those places to go to if you're not up to speed on things.
What is your zero trust journey? Listen to all Zero Trust episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Learn more at ztjourney.com.
Yeah, one of my friends actually, he's a CISO, and asked me that, hey Victor, there's so much out there, so much training, and my staff members are just overwhelmed. Like every vendor has their technology trainings, and every vendor agnostic like SANS or ISA2 or CSA, they all have that as well. So like, where do we start when it comes to zero trust? I said, you know what? Do a Friday lunch and learn. Every Friday or every other Friday, just do 1 hour, and all you guys do it, like, just gather around. Don't just listen to someone else. Also try to translate to your own organization, your own architecture. Like, hey, this is how we have it. Write it down. This is how we should improve it, and put some milestones around it. So if you translate what you're learning back straight into the organization enterprise right away, it'll resonate with you, first of all. Second, to your point, you're going to start calling out BS as soon as you hear from the vendor who'll be like, hey, let me tell you what zero trust is. No. You were learning as well. So build that maturity. You don't have to dedicate like a month set aside for this one. And this is a journey. This will not stop. Like you're gonna pick up something 6 months later, you learn about it, implement that into the framework and architecture. Same 12 months later, 18 months later. So you're going to have to figure out a scalable way of learning, implementing, rinse and repeat. It's not our traditional way of training where we go in, boot camp, come back, take certification, go home. It's a little bit kind of different. So my advice is apply your day job in this training and vice versa. What you're learning from the training and apply into your day job. This will be a recursive way of actually keeping up to date what's going on in Zero Trust, what are the major players, what the new technology, new innovation. And the last thing I'll say when it comes to trainings, once you have a basic understanding what the core tenets are, what you need to do for, build a rudimentary architecture on your own. Don't let vendors dictate that for you. Start somewhere that you think that that's gonna help your organization based on what you already know about the organization. This will force you actually to identify an inventory. I have seen over and over again when you try to build an architecture, this will force you to ask the smart questions that vendors will not be attached to it. Applications. Hey, how do the processes in between the DevOps and the SecOps? These are the questions only you, as the emotionally attached to the company, will ask. Vendors will not do it for you. So not only you actually learn something about the processes and build a reference architecture, now vendors come in and you can tell them, hey, this is what I have. I don't have formal RFP. I don't have 80 questions ready for you, but this is an example or sample for my organization. Tell me how your solution fits into it. And just tell me where you fits into it. Don't tell me that this is it. Your solution is it. Tell me where you fit into it with other technologies. I think that's a learning curve, training curve. I've been recommending that build it as a almost monthly, weekly, whatever the cadence you want to choose, and try to actually apply it immediately, because it's not like your bare minimum or you're starting from scratch.
Nope.
You have something security. If you're learning about zero trust, if you're talking about zero trust, you have something in your organization already. And if you don't, then that's even better. You're going to start something. So this is a good opportunity to actually bite small, chew, and then apply it right away. It just helps you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Victor, like, about all of that. The biggest thing that I love that you pulled out that I think helps navigate through the vendor FUD, like, around all of this is, you have a litany of different security solutions probably deployed at your organization today. There's no reason that any of those pieces can't be used to build out what your zero trust architecture should look like. Now, can you level up those capabilities by getting something else? Absolutely, all the time. To your point earlier, technology is evolving all the time. The capabilities are advancing. Things, are becoming more and more available to make it easier to implement a variety of different security controls. But, I think the biggest kind of like FUD that's kind of put out there is like, people are saying, I can't use my existing network security stack to implement zero trust. You absolutely can. Like, I don't understand like where the narrative came from. Sure, are things more susceptible to, attacks and other things, like just like any other security solution? Absolutely. But if you're waiting to have this perfect panacea of security solutions to build out, your zero trust architecture or implement zero trust, you can create those logs.
It doesn't exist. People before me told me they've been looking for it. It doesn't exist. And people after me will still be looking for it. You're absolutely right. See, certain enough you actually, but you're absolutely right. It's that fear that I don't know everything about zero trust. You don't need to. You know your business. You know your security. There's a framework you just need to adopt. That's it. To John's point, zero trust is not complicated unless you're making it.
Yes.
And that's what happens over and over. We just make it complicated, and thanks vendors. But it's in their best interest. So yeah. All right. Let's help the other side of the camp here, who are zero trust non-believers, and I respect you. How can they use business terms, or how can we use business terms to influence them? That even though zero trust has some terms, and even though zero trust has specific IT technology, cyber words in it, at the end of the day, we are helping the business here. If I don't have breaches, I don't have to pay the high insurance, or I don't have to do the incident response. If I have a tight process and verification, now the insider threats or those mistakes, you can reduce that. So ultimately, we're improving the efficiency of the business. So Steve, you have talked to a lot of customers, and in your opinion, how can we turn this zero trust conversation into business conversation?
So maybe this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but so be it. Unless you're working at a technology company who understands technical terms and is really like a very, a workforce that's just up on all of the technology trends and able to kind of understand all of that. I find that using any of the zero trust terminology just doesn't land. It doesn't work for convincing folks or getting them to understand that, this is the right security direction to pursue. So I find that taking whatever your business is about, whether that be an energy from waste company, that they burn garbage, as their primary business thing. It's like, how is this thing that you're talking about, zero trust? You may have to brand it as something completely different. How's it going to enable those trucks to come in, dump the garbage so that it can be burned and we can bill our customers for that? For insurance companies, how's this going to allow us to continue to write policies and, determine risk for those policies as we write them? I found that a lot of organizations, they ditch the trust language entirely because, to a point that you were making earlier, that I think fills, or supports the narrative of FUD around zero trust is people think zero trust. That means I don't have to trust in my employees or the people that I'm doing business with. Zero trust was born out of a technology ecosystem. It's tied to technology and processes that involve technology. It does not mean that you're not trusting your employees. That's a business decision. That's culture, other things, around all of that. So I find that whatever your organization's trying to support from a business perspective, I've seen it called adaptive trust, because again, they want to weave the people trust narrative with the technology trust and narrative to not say that we're not going to trust people anymore. And so, it is key in a lot of cases and to a lot of customers, many companies that I've worked at have not used the zero trust terminology because it doesn't land. It confuses people. It spins up these gigantic education campaigns that delays them
Yeah.
from pursuing any of this. And so I've found that use whatever language lands for your organization. Go and look at your investor decks. Like, what is your business trying to pursue to grow, within the next year or two or the next quarter? Like, what are the major initiatives that you have going on? How can you plug right into that and use the marketing side of things to advocate for this new security pursuit that is going to support them growing the business and acquiring more companies and building new solutions? Without all of that, you're going to fall flat on your face, and it's going to be
Yeah.
really, really tough for you to even get, any of this off the ground. You and I may know that it's zero trust and what that means,
Yeah.
but, the business leaders that you're working with, some of them don't even care. Like they're not invested in that. They know that, I pay Steve and Victor to secure my organization, and I'll take their advice, around how I should implement things. But, if they're throwing a bunch of technical terminology at me, even pre-zero trust, that those types of things just don't land. And I found that many organizations that I've worked at tried that approach and tried large education campaigns, and they were restarting all of their zero trust initiatives years later because they just could not make it past the starting line because folks were confused, or they were again, they got stuck up in the culture aspect of things, saying, "You telling me that I can't trust Bob over in accounting? I love Bob.
Yeah.
He helps me make sure that I make money, year after year." So, you know, uh, that's a long way of saying that, again, it just like any technology project, technical terms aren't always going to land with your audience. And you need to be able to tie whatever technical pursuit that you're going after,
Yeah.
how that's going to result in business outcomes or support whatever business outcomes you're going after, whether that means growing the business X%, acquiring companies. All of these are, different use cases for zero trust
Yeah.
in supporting, whatever your organization's goal is. And the other huge mistake that I see tied in with all of this is that a lot of zero trust programs that I've been part of or I've advised don't take into account the user experience. They throw that part out of
What's
it,
it? Yeah.
and they build this crazy zero trust architecture monster that when you go and use it, like in practical day-to-day use, it made things 10 times worse. You don't know, like maybe Susie had to like reconnect to the VPN like 6 times in a day to get to the things that she needed to do her job. Maybe Bob had to multi-factor 20 times in a day because we don't trust him. And so we want him to constantly prove, who he is, but that wasn't really the right way to pursue things. And so I've seen people kind of mess up, on that front, on implementing zero trust, taking things way too literally,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not looking at the end all be all like outcome and what the user experience and the user journey looks like when you go and implement these things.
And you said it perfectly. I think I have learned this the hard way, that when you build zero trust architectures, don't make it so complicated that never actually leaves that test bed or your UAT group. It just never leaves. It never went to the production because it's just not practical. You're going to get every VP in the departments saying that, I'm sorry, I can't support it. On the contrary, if you actually look at, this is where technologies actually help. If you actually look at technologies which are actually making transparent decisions for your zero trust architecture and become part of the ecosystem, yes, that's where vendors shine. Those are the vendors I would go and hang out with, because they are actually helping me enforce zero trust controls based on the framework that I have dictated. But now on the user side, I have made it actually almost seamless. Even better, I made user experience better. So whatever technology I had, let's say VPN, you mentioned, so I'll pick on VPN. If I had to do VPN once or twice a day, but if I use a technology which actually doesn't require VPN anymore, I still get to my application and all the security is happening transparent to the user, and yet we, the security people, get the maximum control we could in the transaction verification. Yeah, that's a win. That's a win we can take and we can muster. So, and it's funny you mentioned about the business terms. I think we all were taught that don't use jargons when you're speaking to the business people.
Yes.
Do not. Zero trust, yes, it's not a jargon, and yet it is, because the technical term, you said it right, like it was built in the circles where people understand technology, cyber, digital, that sort of thing. Now when we translate, don't say zero trust. Start with that risk posture, risk number. At the end of the day, what does the organization want? Want to make more money, do more business, and reduce the risk. Security's job is to actually go align with all those three. Zero trust is a framework you would apply in your security program to reduce the risk so business can sell more, do more, and ultimately make more money. Or if it's nonprofit, then help them with the mission. That's what it is at the end of the day. So with zero trust, as Steve said, just try to keep those jargons, technology, verbiage in your circle where people are understanding. But if you're going outside of that, just use the regular business language. They understand that. Of course they do. So, Steve, thanks so much. This was really insightful, fun conversation, actually. Any last words of wisdom as we wrap up this session? And we are going to bring you back, actually. This was fun, and we don't want to end it here.
Yeah, no, thank you again, Victor, for having me. Again, I just highly recommend that you call out, those vendors on all of the things that Victor and I talked about today, because, to the point that you made earlier, if a vendor isn't making your life easier while you're implementing some of these things and they're not making it more transparent, then that's not a partner that you want to have a long-term, relationship as an organization with. And so highly, highly advise, taking the advice that Victor threw out there around that, and going and, calling BS on vendors, like when they say that putting in their blinky box to the point you made earlier, if that's not making your life easier, then is that the right solution for you?
Excellent. People know my sentiments about these things. I've been very vocal about it. So anyway, Steve, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening to us. Tune in for our next Zero Trust Journey episode. Cheers.
What is your zero trust journey? Listen to all Zero Trust episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Learn more at ztjourney.com.